She unchained a wolf from silver chains. The Alpha King transformed and claimed her. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the anticipation of what lay ahead. She had been here before in dreams, in whispers, but never in reality. She had heard the stories, the legends that spoke of the Wolf King, the once mighty Alpha, now reduced to a mere beast. Bound by silver chains, kept in a forgotten dungeon beneath the castle, his soul cursed, his body marked by the unnatural glow of the chains that held him. Alara had never believed in such things. But there were moments, deep, silent moments, when her instincts told her that fate had drawn her here for a reason. The torches on the walls flickered, casting long shadows as she approached the iron door that led to the dungeon. She paused, listening to the soft hum of magic that seemed to pulse from behind the heavy oak. The whispers had grown louder in the last few weeks, calling her to this very place. Her fingers brushed against the cool surface of the door as she pushed it open, revealing the darkness beyond. The air here was thick with an ancient power, a presence that seemed to breathe. She stepped inside, her heart racing but her resolve unwavering. The Wolf King lay in the center of the chamber, chained to the stone floor. His massive form was covered in shadows, his fur matted and wild. The silver chains wrapped around his limbs and neck, glowing faintly in the dim light. He was not just a wolf, his presence was more than that. There was an aura about him, a strange energy that seemed to pulse with both fury and despair. Alara took a cautious step forward. Her heart ached at the sight of him. She had seen him in the visions, yes, but they had been nothing like this. The dreams had spoken of power, of a king who had once ruled over lands far beyond this kingdom. But here he was broken, his spirit caged by the very chains that had bound him to this place for so long. She knew instinctively that he was more than the beast he appeared to be. His eyes, glowing faintly in the dark, were filled with intelligence and sorrow, sorrow for a past that had been stolen from him. With each step she took closer, the air grew heavier, the magic surrounding him more tangible. She reached out, her hand trembling as she touched the silver chain that bound him to the stone floor. It crackled under her fingers, the cool metal pulsing with energy. "Why are you here?" His voice was deep, hoarse, like the growl of an animal that had been starved for too long. Alara flinched at the sound, but she didn't pull away. "I've come to free you." The Wolf King lifted his head slowly, his eyes narrowing. "Free me. You think you can break the chains? Do you not see what I am?" His voice was a mix of anger and pain. "I am nothing but a monster." "No," Alara whispered, her voice gentle. "You are not a monster." The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. Alara could feel the weight of his gaze on her, a mixture of disbelief and something else, something she couldn't quite place. She knelt beside him, her fingers still resting on the cold silver. The magic that radiated from the chains was unlike anything she had ever felt. It was ancient, powerful, and filled with malice. She had no idea how to break it, but she knew she had to try. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden movement. The Wolf King's eyes flashed and his body shifted, the chains rattling violently as though they had a life of their own. Alara gasped, stepping back, but the chains did not break. They only pulsed brighter, as if reacting to her presence. "What are you?" Alara whispered, her breath catching in her throat. "I am cursed," the Wolf King growled, his voice low and dangerous. "I was once a king, a ruler of lands you could never imagine, but I was betrayed by those I trusted. Now I am nothing more than this beast you see before you, a curse that will never end." Alara's heart ached at his words. She had never heard of a curse like this, one that twisted a man into a wolf and kept him bound for so long. She could see the pain in his eyes, the hopelessness that lingered there like a shadow he could never escape. "I know of curses," Alara said softly, "but I also know that they can be broken." The Wolf King's eyes hardened. "And what makes you think you can break mine?" "You are just a healer, a simple woman who believes in things like hope and kindness." Ilara met his gaze with a steady look. Hope is all I have left, and kindness is not weakness. For a moment there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something vulnerable. It was quickly masked by his anger, but it was there, hidden beneath the surface. He growled softly, but this time there was no malice in the sound. You think you can save me. From this fate, you cannot. I will try, Ilara said firmly, standing up. Because you are not a monster. You are a man, a king, and you deserve to be free. There was a long pause, the only sound the steady rhythm of the torches flickering in the gloom. Then the Wolf King spoke again, his voice barely a whisper. Why do you care? Alara's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know how to answer him. She had always been drawn to the wounded, the lost. But this was different. This was a man, a king, who had been robbed of everything. His kingdom, his family, his identity. And yet there was something in him that still longed for redemption, for freedom. I care because I see you, she said quietly. I see the man beneath the chains, and I won't let you be lost forever. There was a heavy silence, and for a moment, Ilara wondered if she had made a mistake. But then, to her surprise, the Wolf King lowered his head slightly, as if acknowledging her words. I was once a king, he muttered, more to himself than to her. But I have forgotten what it is to be human. Ilara knew then that freeing him wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to try. She stood back, taking a deep breath as she focused on the chains. The magic that held them in place was powerful, but she had felt such magic before. Her grandmother had taught her how to break the weakest spells. This was different, though. This was ancient, a curse steeped in centuries of bloodshed and sorrow. Her fingers traced the silver once more, and as she did, she whispered a prayer. It wasn't a prayer for the Wolf King. It was a prayer for herself, for the strength to do what needed to be done. The chains pulsed again, brighter this time, as though they could feel the power she was trying to summon. Ilara closed her eyes, breathing deeply. She had to focus. She had to believe. Then, with a soft crack, one of the chains broke. The Wolf King's head snapped up, his eyes wide. What? Ilara's heart raced as she felt the magic shift in the air. It wasn't enough to free him yet, but it was a start. She smiled faintly. You are not beyond saving, Rhaegar. The Wolf King's eyes widened, the recognition flickering in them. You know my name, she nodded, her hand still pressed against the silver chain. I know more than you think. Cliffhanger. As Ilara focused on the next chain, a low rumble shook the dungeon. The walls trembled and the very air seemed to warp around them. Something stirred in the shadows, a presence that was neither human nor beast. Ilara froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The Wolf King's eyes narrowed. There is someone else here. And then the darkness moved. The shadows in the dungeon trembled as if alive, as Ilara stepped back from the broken chain. Rhaegar's form stirred, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. His body was still bound by silver chains, but the chains now lay in pieces around him, broken and twisted. There was a look in his eyes, something between gratitude and suspicion, as he gazed at Ilara. You actually did it, he murmured, his voice rough and low, like the growl of a wolf who had been denied its freedom for too long. The deep sorrow that had shadowed his gaze before was still there, but now there was something else, something like hope. Ilara nodded, stepping back cautiously. It's only the beginning, she said softly, her voice filled with both determination and doubt. She had never dealt with a curse like this before. She knew the magic was ancient, far beyond her experience, but there was something about him, something about his pain that pulled at her, urging her to keep going. She took a deep breath. You were cursed, weren't you? Not just trapped. There's more to this. More than just the chains. Rhaegar's eyes darkened, his jaw tightening. He said nothing at first, but the look on his face spoke volumes. Ilara knew he was reluctant to share his past, but she also knew that she needed to understand it. If she was going to help him, they needed to face the truth of what had happened. Why don't you tell me? She asked gently. You don't have to hide it from me. For a long moment, Rhaegar said nothing, his gaze fixed on the broken chains at his feet. Then slowly he lifted his eyes to meet hers, and for the first time there was something close to vulnerability in them. "I was once a king," he began, his voice quiet, almost a whisper, "a ruler of the north. My kingdom was vast, my people loyal, but I was betrayed. Not by my enemies, but by those closest to me. My own family, my brother. He wanted my throne, and he took it from me." Reger's voice faltered, and for a moment Alara could see the weight of the years pressing down on him. His shoulders slumped slightly, as though the memories were too much to bear. "He had me trapped, betrayed by those I trusted, imprisoned, cursed. They used silver to bind me, and the curse that followed was even worse. It turned me into this, into the beast you see before you." Alara took a step forward, her heart aching for him. She could see the scars, both physical and emotional, etched into him. This man, this king, had been lost, and the pain of that loss was written across his every feature. "You were a man once," she said softly. "A king, like you said, but you've been trapped for so long you've forgotten who you were." Reger's gaze softened just a little. "I don't know who I am anymore. The chains, this curse, have taken everything. I can't even remember what it felt like to be free." Alara reached out, her hand brushing his arm gently. It was a small gesture, but it seemed to make him flinch, as though he had forgotten what it meant to feel kindness. "You don't have to remember everything at once," she said quietly. "But we can help you. I can help you." Reger's eyes flickered with something, hope perhaps, or skepticism. "And what makes you think you can? You're just a healer." "I'm more than just a healer," Alara replied, meeting his gaze firmly. "I'm someone who believes that no one is beyond saving, not even you." Reger watched her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "We'll see." As the days passed, Alara and Reger ventured deeper into the forest. The silver chains that had bound him now lay discarded behind them, but the road ahead was not easy. Though the chains were gone, the curse that held Reger was far from broken. He was free in body, but his soul still carried the weight of his past. The landscape around them was wild and untamed, a reflection of the inner turmoil that Reger still carried. Alara could feel it, like a storm that raged just beneath the surface of his calm exterior. He rarely spoke, and when he did, it was only in short, clipped sentences. He was a man who had been stripped of his identity, and now he was slowly piecing it back together, but the journey was painful for both of them. Alara did her best to keep him calm. She tended to his wounds, fed him when he grew hungry, and offered him the silence he seemed to crave. But as they journeyed deeper into the wild, something shifted between them. There were moments, quiet, fleeting moments, when she would catch his gaze, and in those moments, the air between them would crackle with something neither of them could deny. The pull between them was undeniable. Alara tried to push it aside to focus on her mission, but it was becoming harder and harder to ignore. Reger, too, seemed to feel it. But every time she looked at him, she saw the king he had once been, and the man he could still become. One evening, as they set camp beneath the stars, Alara sat beside a crackling fire. Reger, his back to her, was staring into the flames, lost in thought. She had been watching him for some time, studying the way the firelight flickered across his face, the way his shoulders tensed with every movement. "You don't have to be silent all the time," Alara said softly, breaking the stillness. "You can talk to me if you want." Reger didn't respond right away. For a moment she thought he hadn't heard her, but then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to live without the curse," he said, his words heavy with regret. "I don't know how to be the man I was. I don't even know if I can be that man again." Alara didn't know what to say at first. She had never faced something as complex as the curse that had bound him, but she knew one thing for sure: he wasn't beyond saving. "You don't have to be that man," she said quietly. "You can be whoever you choose to be. You're not your curse, Reger. You're not your past." Reger turned to look at her then, his eyes searching hers as though looking for some kind of truth. The flickering firelight cast a soft glow on his features, and for the first time he looked more human than beast. "I want to believe that," he said, his voice hoarse. "But after everything, how can I?" Alara smiled softly. "Because you still have a heart, Rhaegar. And that's enough." The silence stretched between them, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of understanding, full of something unspoken that neither of them could yet name. The following morning, they continued their journey. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with dangers both seen and unseen. But for the first time since they had met, Alara felt a glimmer of hope that they could both find the redemption they sought. As they moved deeper into the forest, however, the air grew colder and the shadows seemed to lengthen. Alara felt a shiver run down her spine. Something was wrong. "Do you feel that?" she asked, her voice tense. Rhaegar's eyes narrowed, his senses alert. "Something is following us." Before Alara could respond, the sound of footsteps, soft yet deliberate, echoed through the trees. A figure emerged from the shadows. Cliffhanger. Alara's heart raced as she took a step back, instinctively moving closer to Rhaegar. The stranger stepped into the clearing, and in their hand they held a dagger, a blade of silver. "This is where your journey ends," the stranger said, their voice cold as ice. Rhaegar growled low, his eyes flashing with warning. "Who are you?" The figure didn't answer, but the air around them seemed to pulse with dark energy, and Alara knew, with a sinking feeling in her gut, that they were not alone in this fight. The figure in the shadows didn't move, but the air around them seemed to tighten, charged with an ominous energy. Alara's heart raced, her senses on high alert. The forest around them had gone still, as if holding its breath. Rhaegar stood tall, his eyes narrowed in warning. The silver chains were long gone, but the beast within him still stirred, a force he could not fully control. He had been trapped in a cage for years, but now, with his freedom just beginning to take shape, he was ready to protect what little he had left. "Who are you?" Alara's voice was steady, though her hands trembled at her sides. "What do you want?" The figure's lips curled into a cruel smile, though their face remained hidden beneath the dark cloak. "You have something I want," the stranger replied, their voice cold and calm, "and I've come to collect it." Rhaegar's growl deepened, his body coiling like a spring ready to snap. He stepped forward, positioning himself between Alara and the stranger. "If you think you can take anything from us, you're mistaken." Alara placed a hand on his arm, her touch gentle but firm. "Rhaegar, wait," she said, her voice a calm anchor in the rising storm of tension. "We don't know who they are. Let's not make things worse." The stranger's laughter echoed through the clearing, sharp and unsettling. "You truly think you have a choice? You have already crossed the line, healer. There is no going back now." Alara's heart beat faster. The words felt like a warning, and the weight of it pressed heavily on her chest. She could feel the dark magic radiating from the stranger, a power that seemed to press in on them from all sides. "Do you know who I am?" the figure asked, stepping closer, their cloak flowing behind them like a shadow in the night. Rhaegar stiffened, his eyes flicking to Alara as though he was weighing his next move. The tension between them was palpable. Alara could see the struggle in his eyes. He wanted to fight, but he also knew that they had to be careful. Every choice they made could lead to something worse. The stranger finally lowered their hood, revealing a face Alara had never expected to see. It was a woman, her features sharp and beautiful, though her eyes gleamed with a coldness that made Alara's blood run cold. There was something ancient about her, something that made Alara instinctively take a step back. "You," Alara's voice faltered, her gaze widening in shock. "You're the Silver Witch." The woman's lips curved into a cruel smile. "Yes, healer, I am she. And I have come to claim what's mine." Rhaegar's fists clenched at his sides, his muscles tight with restraint. "You're the one who cursed me," he snarled, his voice thick with hatred. "You're the one who ruined my life." The Silver Witch's eyes gleamed, but her expression was unreadable. "Ruined? No, I only did what was necessary to maintain the balance." She stepped closer, her gaze turning to Alara with a cold, calculating intensity. "You think you can undo what has been done?" You are nothing more than a fool who believes in fairy tales and magic. Curses like his cannot be broken, not by you. Alara took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. We've already broken part of it, she said, her voice filled with quiet defiance. And we'll keep breaking it piece by piece until Reger is free. The Silver Witch's smile faltered for a moment, a flicker of something like disbelief passing through her eyes. Then, with a swift movement, she raised her hand, and the air around them crackled with dark energy. You think you can defeat me, the witch hissed. I have seen your future, healer. I have seen your death. You will never break the curse. And she pointed at Reger, her voice dripping with venom. He is mine. His soul belongs to me. Reger's growl grew louder, his body trembling with barely contained fury. But Alara stepped forward, standing between him and the witch. We will not bow to you, she said firmly. We will fight, together. The Silver Witch's laughter rang out, echoing through the trees. Very well, she said, her voice dark and heavy with power. You want to fight, then fight, but know this, you are both already doomed. With a flick of her wrist, the witch sent a bolt of magic flying toward Alara. The air shimmered as the dark energy crackled and surged forward, but before Alara could react, Reger moved with blinding speed. He leaped in front of her, his body colliding with the magic, and for a moment, Alara saw nothing but the flash of light and shadows. When the light faded, Reger was on the ground, his body convulsing with pain. The witch's magic had struck him with the force of 1,000 storms. His eyes were wide, filled with agony, but there was something else there, something that made Alara's heart skip a beat. Reger's eyes met hers, and in that moment she understood. He was fighting for more than his freedom. He was fighting for her. No, Alara cried, rushing to his side. She knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she touched his fevered skin. Reger, please, hold on. Reger's breath came in ragged gasps, his body still writhing in pain, but his gaze never left hers. Alara, his voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. You have to run, she'll... No, Alara shouted, her eyes wild with fear. I'm not leaving you. The Silver Witch stepped forward, her smile returning as she watched them. How touching, she said with mock sweetness. But it's too late. The curse will never be broken. It's woven too deeply into the very fabric of his soul. Alara gritted her teeth, her heart pounding in her chest. There had to be a way. There had to be something she could do. She refused to let him die like this. The witch's words echoed in her mind. The curse will never be broken. But Alara refused to believe that. There had to be a way to destroy it, to undo the twisted magic that bound Reger. She could feel the pulse of power within her, the magic she had inherited from her grandmother, the healer's blood that ran deep in her veins. Think, Alara, think. Then it came to her, a memory she had almost forgotten. Her grandmother had spoken of a ritual, one that could break even the oldest of curses, but it came at a cost. It required a sacrifice. Without thinking, Alara reached into her pack, pulling out the small vial of herbs she had kept for emergencies. She crushed the vial in her hand, releasing the powder into the air. The magic swirled around them, the air thick with energy. Reger's eyes widened as the magic surrounded them both. What are you doing? He gasped, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm not letting you die, Alara said fiercely, her gaze fixed on the witch. I'm going to break the curse. I don't care what it costs. The Silver Witch's smile faltered, but she didn't move. You think you can defeat me with that little trick? You are a fool. But Alara ignored her. She focused all her energy on the magic, calling on the ancient power that flowed through her. The earth beneath them trembled and the wind began to howl. The Silver Witch's expression turned from amusement to frustration as Alara's magic built to a crescendo. Then, with a final, desperate cry, Alara thrust her hand forward. Cliffhanger. The world seemed to explode in a flash of light and sound. The force of the magic shook the very ground beneath them, and for a moment everything went silent. When Alara opened her eyes, the witch was gone. But Reger. He was still lying on the ground, his body motionless. The world around Alara seemed to hold its breath as she knelt beside Rhaegar, her heart pounding in her chest. The magic that had erupted just moments ago still lingered in the air, thick with energy, and the ground beneath her feet seemed to pulse with a strange rhythm. She reached out, her hands trembling as they hovered over his still form, but there was no sign of movement. "Rhaegar," she whispered, her voice cracking as she gently touched his forehead. His skin was cold, too cold, and his breath came in shallow gasps. Panic rose in her chest like a rising tide. Had the magic worked, or had it only made things worse? For a long moment there was nothing but the sound of the wind whispering through the trees. Alara's mind raced, her thoughts jumbled. She couldn't lose him now. Not after everything they had been through. Not after everything he had sacrificed. Then slowly, ever so slowly, she felt a change, the faintest flicker of warmth beneath her fingers. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was enough. A shiver ran through his body and his eyes fluttered open. "Rhaegar," Alara whispered, her voice filled with hope. His eyes met hers, and for the first time they were clear, no longer clouded by pain or rage. There was confusion there, but also something else, something like understanding. He blinked a few times, as if waking from a long, dark dream. "Alara," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "What happened? Did it work?" Alara's heart soared with relief, but she couldn't stop the tears that welled in her eyes. She brushed them away quickly, but they kept coming. She had thought he was gone. She had thought she had lost him forever. "You're alive," she said softly, almost in disbelief. "You're really alive." Rhaegar's lips curled into a faint smile, though it was laced with uncertainty. "I don't know what happened, but I feel different, not the same. It's like the curse is gone, but there's something else." Alara helped him sit up, her hand steadying him. His eyes were still dark, but there was a new softness to them, a vulnerability that hadn't been there before. "You've changed," Alara said quietly. "You're free, Rhaegar. The curse is broken, but I think it's left something behind, something you'll need to learn to live with." Rhaegar nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. He looked at his hands as if seeing them for the first time, his fingers curling and uncurling as if testing the new sensations. "I don't know if I can live with it," he murmured. "Everything I was is gone. The king I was, the man I was, those parts of me are lost." Alara reached out, placing her hand on his. "You don't have to be the man you were," she said softly. "You can be someone new, someone better. The past doesn't have to define you." Rhaegar met her gaze, his eyes searching hers as if looking for some kind of truth. There was a long silence between them, heavy with everything unsaid. The magic had freed him, yes, but it had also left him exposed. He was no longer a king bound by chains, but a man who had to rebuild everything from nothing. "I don't know how to start over," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to do it alone," Alara replied. Her voice was steady now, stronger than before. "I'm here. We'll do this together." For the first time in a long time, Rhaegar smiled. It was small, almost shy, but it reached his eyes. "Together," he repeated, as though tasting the word for the first time. It felt right. The air around them seemed to shift, as if the world itself was reacting to their bond. The sky above had cleared, and the sun's warmth began to filter through the trees, casting soft light on the ground beneath them. The forest, once dark and ominous, now seemed calmer, as though the land itself recognized the change. Rhaegar stood, his movements slow but steady, and Alara followed him. He stretched his arms above his head, testing the limits of his new strength. He was no longer the beast he had been, no longer the man trapped in a cage of silver. He was something different now, something whole. Alara's heart raced as she watched him, her gaze softening. She could see it now, the man beneath the wolf, the king beneath the scars. She saw the strength in him, but also the tenderness that had been buried beneath years of pain and rage. He was no longer just a king to be feared, but a man who could love and be loved in return. But their journey was far from over. They still had to face the world outside, the kingdom that had once feared him, the enemies that still lurked in the shadows. There was still much to be done. "I'm not the man I once was," Rhaegar said, his voice quiet but resolute. "But I'll make sure my future is different. For you, for us." Alara smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. "I believe you," she said, her voice steady. They began to walk side by side through the forest. The world felt different now, lighter somehow, as if the very air had changed. They had faced the darkness, and together they had overcome it. But even as they moved forward, Alara knew that the true test was still to come. The Silver Witch was not gone for good. And there were others who would still try to claim Rhaegar, to tear him down and use him for their own gain. But they would face those challenges together. She would be there, every step of the way. As they emerged from the forest, the first rays of dawn touched the horizon, painting the sky with shades of gold and pink. It was a new beginning, not just for Rhaegar but for them both. They reached a clearing, and Alara paused, looking at him. "Rhaegar, there's something I need to tell you." He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "What is it?" Her heart fluttered in her chest, and for a moment she struggled to find the right words. "I'm not just a healer, I'm connected to this curse. To you." Rhaegar raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" "I was born to break this curse," she said quietly. "My grandmother knew. She taught me everything I could. I had to free you, Rhaegar, but there's more. The magic we used, it's tied to both of us. We can't undo it, but we can control it. We have the power together to rebuild." Rhaegar's gaze softened, and for a moment there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Something like understanding, like acceptance. "You've always known, haven't you?" he asked, his voice gentle. Alara nodded. "Yes, I've always known." Rhaegar took a step forward, closing the distance between them. "Then let's rebuild, Alara, together." She smiled, her heart swelling with a mixture of hope and love. Together, and as they stood there, hand in hand, the future seemed full of possibilities. The world might be filled with darkness, but they had each other. And together they would face whatever came next, be it light or shadow. Cliffhanger. As they turned to leave the clearing, a distant sound reached their ears, a low, haunting cry. It came from deep within the forest, a sound unlike anything they had heard before. Rhaegar's hand tightened around hers, his body going tense. "Do you hear that?" Alara nodded, her instincts flaring. Something's coming. And then from the shadows of the trees, a figure stepped forward, tall, cloaked, and radiating power. The air around them grew cold, and the world once again seemed to hold its breath.